Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben, and I'm here from the Hospital Research Foundation group Arthritis, and I'm very happy to welcome everyone to our first webinar of 2024 with Dr. Evangeline Mantzioris. Now, I'd like to start tonight with acknowledgement of country, and that me and Evangeline both present from Ghana land, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. This webinar tonight has been made possible through funding from the Country SA Primary Health Network, and we thank them for this. Now, I'd also like to raise that the question and answers feature is open the entire time. Now, while we won't be stopping and actually answering those questions as they come through, one thing that I always like to say is that if a question comes up during Evangeline's presentation, it can be really useful just to submit that right then instead of waiting until the end. Now, a little bit about our presenter tonight with Dr. Mantzioris. She is the Program Director at the University of South Australia's Nutrition and Food Science degree. She's still an accredited and practicing dietitian and sports dietitian. Alongside that, she's a member of the National Health and Medical Research Council, and she's a part of the Australian Dietary Guidelines Expert Review Committee. Evangeline has extensive experience in clinical dietetics and teaching, and she's really passionate about sharing her knowledge of nutritional science. Evangeline has appeared on radio, including Today, television, print media, and is a regular writer for The Conversation. Evangeline still does research, and that includes things such as fats, sports nutrition, Mediterranean diet, and environmental food nexus. So we're incredibly lucky to have Evangeline on tonight, and I'll hand over to her.
Thank you so much, Ben, for that introduction and for the invitation to present again to the Hospital Research Foundation, particularly in food and arthritis. Arthritis is an area I did do research in and continue to do so now. So thank you very much for having me. I just want to excuse myself in case I start coughing. We've just had COVID come through our household. So if I cough, I'll try to turn off the sound and have a drink, and then I'll be back on as soon as possible. So just bear with me for that. Okay, so let's start. Food and arthritis. One of the things many people ask who are suffering from arthritis is what they can do to improve their condition. And last year I presented about the potential supplements, and today we're actually going to look at what food is best and what diet is best. Whoops, now where are we? So with the aims of a diet for arthritis, and this is in fact for any condition that someone might have, we have several aims that we're trying to get out of the diet. The first one is to maintain a healthy weight. In some cases, it's preferential for people to get their weight as low as possible for a particular condition. But with arthritis, we know that if you're within the healthy weight range, and if people know what the BMI is, between 20 and 25, that's the best place to sit for arthritis. The other aim of a diet for arthritis is to reduce the symptoms that the disease has. And this is the same for any disease. And so in this case, we're talking about improving functionality, improving movement, and also improving your quality of life. At the same time, we also want to reduce the progress of the disease. That is, we don't want the disease to get any worse, and we try to do as much as we can with the diet for that to occur. Of course, any pharmaceutical treatment that your doctor has given you will also help this. Now, this next one is also very important. We're also aiming to avoid any nutritional deficiencies with the diet. It's well and good to say, okay, eating this sort of diet improves my arthritis, but gives you a nutritional deficiency, which produces other problems. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the talk. And of course, the other one is we want to reduce the risk of any other health problems. So we're really looking at this holistically, your arthritis and then your general health, and then reducing the risk of any other health problems. And now this is just a bit of a reminder, and I'm sure that you all know this very well, but inflammation is the key component of rheumatoid arthritis. And out of interest, it's a component of many other diseases as well. So we can see by trying to use the diet to reduce the inflammation as much as possible, we're also going to be helping in other health conditions, and including cardiovascular disease, like reducing your risk of having a heart attack. So inflammation, just to go through it a little bit, is a normal part of your body's immune response. We're in this post-COVID world, and we know how important it is to try to get your immune response to act as quickly as possible. it's the body's attempt to protect itself and remove any harmful stimuli and begin the healing process. But when we talk about inflammation, there's two types. There's the acute inflammation, which starts rapidly. You get a rapid onset and it quickly becomes severe and then it resolves itself. And the second type of inflammation is more of the chronic inflammation, which is the long term, which can last for months or even years. And that is what we see with arthritis, that we have more of a chronic inflammation. So what we're trying to do is use the diet to reduce that chronic inflammation as much as possible. We pretty well know from the evidence that these potential dietary changes in any supplements that people might use tends to affect the chronic inflammation rather than affecting that acute response that you want. Say, for example, if you get a scratch and you're trying to reduce the risk of any bacteria getting through the skin surface. Okay, so it's a pretty confusing world out there. There is so much regarding diets and food patterns and foods to avoid and foods to eat on social media and social marketers. Social influencers, but I refer to them as marketers because often, don't forget, they are getting paid for promoting certain things. And some of these diets that you see up here have been promoted in various ways for various conditions to try to reduce the risk of disease. So we're going to try and cut through all of this and find out, what does the evidence tell us? And by evidence, I mean, what does the scientific research tell us that's been tested well and truly and isn't subject to, our beliefs around certain things? So let's start. When I have looked at healthy diets, there's three that are applicable for trying to reduce inflammation. And not surprisingly, the first one is the anti-inflammatory diet. The second one is the Mediterranean diet. And the third one is the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. Now, they all have very common similarities, and we'll go through each one and we'll see the similarities in them as we go through them. So first of all, we'll start with the anti-inflammatory diet. Now, this is a bit of a funny one in that it's a relatively new concept in the scientific world. And basically, it's a list of foods that have been pulled together from empirical evidence about which foods produce less of an inflammatory response or more of an inflammatory response. And they've pulled this together from reactions they might see in lab tests, when they take components of the food and they add it to cells. It could be what they've seen in animals, and then what they've seen in humans. And it's not so much of a diet, but rather a list of foods. And the anti-inflammatory foods, you can see by the diagram here on the right-hand side, is tomatoes, fruits, and it's all sorts of fruits. And you can see the ones they've listed here from this picture from Harvard University includes strawberries, blueberries, oranges, and cherries. So the interesting thing there is that we've got all the colours of the rainbows in the fruit. Nuts, almonds, walnuts, and other nuts have been shown to have anti-inflammatory properties. Olive oil, and in particular, extra virgin olive oil, which has got higher levels of anti-inflammatory agents in it. Leafy greens, and the darker the green the leaf, the better. So that means things like iceberg lettuce isn't as good as some of your darker green vegetables such as spinach and kale. It doesn't mean you shouldn't eat it, but what it means is you should try to get all the different coloured greens into your diet. And then fatty fish. And for those that joined us in our presentation last year, this one isn't going to be a surprise because we do use omega-3 fats in the way of fish oil, or I've forgotten the name of it, the little fish. Can't remember the name of it, it's escaped me, because they've got omega-3 fats in them. So, and also there's now other non-fish sources of omega-3 fats that are starting to become available on the market. But fatty fish are also important. Now, whilst we've got a list of anti-inflammatory foods, we've also got a list of inflammatory foods. And if we look at those, it probably lists some of our favourite foods, maybe not favourite, but treat foods, fried foods. We've got chips there, but all fried foods fit into this. Sodas, which is actually just soft drinks, and be they sugar or artificially sweetened soft drinks, refined carbohydrates such as white bread, lard. I don't know that many people still have lard, and then also processed meats. So these have been found to increase your inflammation. So if we remember these foods and then consider them in the next two diets that we talk about, you'll see that it all fits in. So the next diet I want to talk about is the Mediterranean diet. Now, I hope you've all had your dinner. I'm not making you hungry, because this is what most people think the Mediterranean diet is, a gyros. And for good measure, it's even got some of those fried chips in there that we saw before. But in fact, this isn't what the Mediterranean diet is. And people go, oh, yeah, yeah, and go, this is more like it. We see there's some nice white chicken fillet in there. There's couscous. There's different coloured vegetables there. We can see there's also some herbs in there. There's olives, there's tomatoes. That's pretty good. So that must be more similar to the Mediterranean diet. But sadly, even this isn't the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet has been defined as the diet from Crete in the 1960s. And for those that might know a little bit of the history at the time, Crete, which is part of Greece, was post-World War II, was under extreme poverty. Very little money was spent on education or healthcare. And what you see in this photo is the typical meal that was eaten in Crete in the 1960s by a family. You can see there's some bread there, there's a plate of olives, it's either an onion or a pear there, that's at the front of the picture, I can't quite tell, but a very Spartan meal. And what that diet, the Mediterranean diet of the 1960s, reflects is the economic situation, the geography of the country, in that they mainly grew olives, the religious aspects that impacted on the diet, as well as the culture. And that is vastly different to what the environment is in the Mediterranean countries now, and indeed for us here in Australia. So this is more reflective of what the Mediterranean diet is. It's a lentil soup. It's got some vegetables in it, onion, bay leaves. It might have a bit of tomato if the family was wealthy, and it might have had a bit of carrot in there as well. So very Spartan, very high fibre-based diet. So remembering that, let's have a closer look at what the Mediterranean diet is. And this is a pyramid style showing the frequency of consumption of these foods. So right at the top, we have sweets, and these were consumed very, very rarely. And then potatoes, about 3 serves a week, and red meat and processed meat, about the same, but very, very small amounts they actually consumed in their diet. White meat was twice a week, and fish and seafood was twice a week. Sorry, the red meat was once a week. And there we go. Sorry, I've got my little video thing over there. The red meat was less than 2 serves a week, and processed meat less than 1, and very, very small amounts. Eggs were one of the main sources of protein in the diet, and then legumes consumed more than twice a week. Dairy, about 2 serves a day. But the big thing here that also helps with inflammation is that it tends to be fermented dairy, so your yogurt and your cheeses. And what we know is when milk, dairy milk, either cow, goat or sheep, when it's fermented, it slightly changes the structure of the fat to make it better for reducing heart disease and for reducing inflammation. So fermented dairy is going to be a better source. And then we've got olives, nuts and seeds consumed in there every day. And likewise, every day, herbs, spices, garlic, onion, with not so much salt. And that increases the flavour of the food, but also remembering that herbs and spices also provides a lot of nutrients and antioxidants into the diet. And then in every meal, they consumed fruit or vegetables, olive oil, bread, pasta, rice, and couscous, and mainly whole grain. In terms of drink, it was mainly water and herbal. Now, the other thing you'll notice in this pyramid is it doesn't just stop at the diet. It also shows the regular physical activity is important, adequate rest, so they're very famous for their siestas in the afternoon, and that is largely cultural. And then sharing meals together, the conviviality of meals, of enjoying meals together. What this did in terms of the local area was it improved the biodiversity. Well, the dietary intakes were linked to the seasonality of foods, which improved the biodiversity, and it maintained the traditional, local and eco-friendly products and cultural traditions and activities that were maintained in the diet. So this is really what the Mediterranean diet looks like. And if we go a bit more into it with actual serve sizes, very long slide, but we'll go through it from the top. Bread, at least 6 slices a day, trying to go for wholemeal or sourdough or whole grain as often as you can. Fruit, seasonal, picking the fruit that's available at the time, 2 pieces a day. And then we've got vegetables, including wild greens, cooked in tomato sauce with olive oil. And what this does, this is referring to the slow cooking of meals as opposed to fast food, which is sort of a fried food, fast food nature. Olive oil, this is the big thing that a lot of people find very difficult about the Mediterranean diet, is about 4 tablespoons of olive oil a day, preferably extra virgin. Now that's 80 mils of oil, which is quite a bit. But that's what makes the Mediterranean diet different to other healthy diets. Olives also being consumed, red wine or the local wine, which is Vizina, which you need quite a bit of stamina to get through. It's got a very unique taste, about 100 to 200 mils a day, and always consumed with meals, never outside of meals. We can see that herbs and spices are also really featured in the diet. And we know that a lot of these herbs actually provide antimicrobial as well as anti-inflammatory properties. So they're all very key and important in the diet. And then tea and coffee. And a lot of the teas were herbal teas that were also used in the diet. Now, all of these are consumed daily, and then 2 or 3 times a week or less. Talked about the fish, meat, mainly sheep or goat, legumes, a wide variety of different types of legumes. Different colours mean different nutrients, even with legumes. So you've got your kidney beans, you've got your black-eyed beans, we've got lentils, chickpeas. All of those are really important. So variety is the key. Nuts, all types of available nuts, including walnuts, almonds and chestnuts, were consumed in the diet. And we've also got free-range eggs. And the difference with free-range eggs is they have different types of fats in them. We know from research that free-range eggs have higher levels of omega-3 fats in them, which are the sort of fats that we find in fish and fish oil. Milk, we've talked about that. Usually it was from sheep's or goat's milk. It wasn't often consumed by adults because it was reserved for children, but what they had left over was made into cheese and yogurt. You can see there is no mention of any processed foods or sugar or sweet foods. So this is what is being promoted as a Mediterranean diet. Oh, there we go. Okay, now the interesting fact, and yes, I should declare that my background is Greek. The word for diet comes from the Greek word dieta. So this is a bit of a, my big fat Greek wedding moment. In Greece, the word for diet actually means the way you choose to live your life. It's not just about the food. And this is an often forgotten aspect of the Mediterranean diet and the favourable health benefits that were reported with the Mediterranean diet from the 60s. For a long time, people just focused on the food, but these other components that we saw in the pyramid are also very important. So we have purposeful exercise outdoors. Excuse me, we know that outdoor exercise in greenery tends to be healthier than being in a gym. Growing and harvesting food, your own food, is a key part of it as well. Cooking and preparing traditional food together is also really important. The conviviality of meals, eating meals together. Alcohol, it's a difficult one because there's so much evidence out there that alcohol has problems for health and also societal problems. So we're never recommending that people should start drinking alcohol, and certainly not what I'm saying. But if you do, always having it with your meals is important. And there's a little bit of evidence coming out in the scientific papers at the moment that it may well act a little bit differently in the body if it's consumed with meals, but that's really preliminary evidence, and I wouldn't want to say it's actually something. And then sleep and siesta are also really important. Okay, and just remembering at the beginning, I was talking about it's also important that the diet reduces your risk of other diseases, and certainly the benefits of the Mediterranean diet have been shown in many other areas. So it reduces the risk of coronary heart disease for primary and secondary, and that means for people that for their first heart attack and then subsequent heart attacks. Metabolic diseases like glucose intolerance and diabetes, it has an impact there. Inflammatory-based diseases such as arthritis and osteoarthritis, for your cognitive ability. Your ability to think through problems as you get older is also improved with the Mediterranean diet. Mental health, depression, anxiety, they have shown improvements with the Mediterranean diet as well. Also improved muscle mass, and improving muscle mass is a key outcome for improving quality of life, also life expectancy, and also for reducing inflammation. And often these benefits are seen without any weight loss needed. Increasingly, the Mediterranean diet is also being, it's being promoted, as I've said, for chronic disease prevention and treatment, but also for environmental sustainability because of the low level of red meat in the diet, mainly grains and cereals, and also because of the techniques involved in growing and harvesting is suitable for the environment. Now, the next diet to talk about is the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. And I'm thinking that many of you have probably seen this diet before, if you look at the picture. So that circular pie plate represents what your plate should look like over the course of the day. So about a third of your diet should be based on grains and cereals, and that includes all sorts. It's not just wheat and bread, it's rice, it's pasta, it's, barley, it's all the different sorts of grains that are out there, oats, everything. Another third of your plate should be filled up with vegetables. And once again, we can see the variety of vegetables here. It can include canned and frozen vegetables. They are perfectly healthy. Frozen vegetables are actually frozen at harvest, so they tend to have higher levels of vitamins in there because you don't get them being denatured. Canned vegetables can also be great, and certainly canned beans are really helpful for people trying to include it in their diet. You just need to be careful with canned products about what sauces or addings, salt, other things that might have been added to it, but mostly it just involves reading the label and checking it. Then we can see the protein group on the left-hand side in the blue is, about a fifth of your plate. And once again in here, it doesn't just mean animal products. It also includes the beans and the legumes and eggs and tofu, which are really important. And also you'll see there's canned fish. So canned fish products are also really good. And then we've got dairy down there, a fifth, and also fruit. So what we can see is that this is actually quite similar to the Mediterranean diet. There's a large focus on plant-based foods in this, and a large intake of fruit and vegetables are promoted. The only difference between the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating and the Mediterranean diet is that it doesn't emphasize using olive oil in it. And then you can see at the bottom on the left-hand side, it says to use in small amounts oils and margarines. And on the right-hand side, and this is an equally important group when it comes to inflammation, is only sometimes and in small amounts. So, before we look at those, I just want to focus on what the serve sizes are for each of these groups. So this shows us the serves. Just trying to move my little camera out of the way so I can see. So it shows us standard serve of vegetables and how many we need for each age group. So if we focus in the 51 to 71, which isn't a lot different to the 19 to 50, we need between 5.5 to 5 serves of vegetables a day, depending on if you're male or female. And if we look at what a serve size is, people get a little bit scared when they hear 5 serves, but it's not actually that much. It's half a cup of cooked vegetables, or a cup of salad vegetables, or half a medium potato or other starchy vegetables such as sweet potatoes or cassava or taro. So once again, it can be canned, it can be frozen, it can be fresh. We look at a variety of cooked and raw vegetables because we get different nutrients coming out depending if it's raw or cooked. And for an example, tomatoes, when are cooked, have a higher bioavailability of a nutrient called lycopene, and that bioavailability increases even more if it's cooked with oil. And if you remember in the Mediterranean diet, one of the features of it is having vegetables cooked in tomato-based sauces with oils, because that enhances some of the absorption of lycopene and other fat-soluble vitamins. This group also includes the legumes and beans, so they can also be a part. The second group is fruit. And fruit's probably a pretty easy one to work out. 2 pieces a day. We've heard of the advertising campaigns quite a bit. It's a medium-sized banana, a medium-sized fruit, a cup of canned fruit, or 2 smaller pieces of fruit. And then people ask about grapes and watermelon, which are out at the moment and really, really yummy. And what we say with that is, with those sorts of fruits, basically what would fit in your palm is a serve of fruit, comfortably in your palm. The next group is grains and cereals. And we can see here for men in the 51 to 70 age gap, it's 6 serves of grains and cereals. And for women, it's 4. So there's a big difference here between men and women. And I'll tell you why that's happened when we get down to dairy. So once again here, 1 slice of bread is 1 serve of dairy. Half a cup of cooked noodles or rice is a serve, sorry, I said a serve of dairy, serve of grains, sorry. 2/3 of a cup of cereal is 1 serve of grain. Or then we've got half a cup of cooked pasta is a serve. The next group is the lean meat, is the protein group. And this varies quite considerably depending on what type it is. And this is probably what scares people the most about what we call a serve of meat. So for men, they need 2.5 a day, and for women, they need 2. So 65 grams of red meat is 1 serve of protein. And 65 grams of red meat, you probably won't be able to tell over the internet. It worked much better when we were face to face. 100 grams is about the size of your palm. And when I used to see patients and I would have really big guys, so they'd have a palm that was twice the size of my hands, I would say, no, not your palm, my palm. So perhaps a better descriptor is a deck of playing cards is 100 grams of red meat. So you're looking at 2/3 of a deck of cards being 65 grams. With chicken, it's a bit bigger, it's 80 grams. With fish, it's 100 grams, or it's 2 eggs, or it's 1 cup of any sort of beans. So it would be pretty rare, I think, for people to have a meal with a 65-gram piece of steak in it. Maybe if you're having a stir fry, it's more likely because you'll be able to mix veggies in it and have your rice or your pasta that goes with it. So often what I suggest to people is maybe having their red meat once a week and having 130 grams or 150 grams, and then the other nights getting some of that chicken in and fish. We know fish is good for arthritis, or beans, and mixing it up that way. And then the last group, which is really important, is dairy. Dairy is important because not only does it supply us protein in the diet, but also calcium. And you'll see that for women, as we get older, the serves of dairy increases. So for those that are under 50, they only need 2.5 serves of dairy a day. But for those women that over 51, it increases to 4 serves. That's effectively a litre of milk a day. And so when they model these diets to allow for the increase in dairy as women get over 50, they had to drop the number of grains. And that's why the grains is lower for women over 50 and the dairy is higher. So it really is a critical food group. It helps to reduce your risk of osteoporosis. We know how detrimental a break fracture can be in older ages in terms of rehabilitation and the risks that come with it afterwards. So having dairy is really, really critical. You'll see here it also includes soy milk. For those that are vegan, soy plant-based milks are great. There's also a whole lot of other plant-based milks on the market now, like rice milk and oat milk and almond milk. They're not as good because they're not as high in protein, and they certainly don't contain all the essential amino acids that are required. So if you're not having any dairy, or if you're a vegan, it's really best to stick to the soy milk. Environmentally, it's also better. It's got a better protein profile. And the other thing that you've got to remember is to buy the soy milk that has added calcium to it, because soy milk on its own, or soybeans, doesn't have enough calcium. Interestingly, though, tofu, because of the way it is made, it's made with a product that's got calcium in it, has calcium in the tofu. So tofu is fine, but when it comes to having the milks, really make sure you read the labels to get the calcium one. Okay, so this was the group I was alluding to earlier. In the past, we've called it sometimes food, the discretionary food, the processed foods. Maybe it's your treat, what you have. But it's an interesting area of research which is increasingly showing that this group is quite problematic for health. Some Australians, a large proportion of Australians, actually get 50% of their kilojoules from these processed foods. And if we look at the types that includes orange juice, alcohol, soft drinks, cordial, lollies, chocolate, sausages, and processed meats, pies and pasties, cakes, hot chips. Our famous Tim Tams are there, hamburgers, all these things. And originally the problem with them was that they had a lot of added saturated fat to them. They also could have a lot of added salt to them. And some of them would also have a lot of added sugar to them. And some of them would have all three of them. And the other problem was they didn't have a lot of other nutrients in it. So we called them energy-dense, nutrient-poor foods. But in about the last 5 years, a lot of evidence has come out that it's not just these three nutrients that are problematic. It's the actual processing of the food that's also problematic. If you like, what processed foods or ultra-processed foods are doing is changing the food structure. And we call the structure of the food matrix. And when you change the food matrix or the food structure, you actually change the way that the nutrients interact with your body. The other problem with this food group is the things that are added to them. And in particular, one ingredient is very problematic, and that's the emulsifiers. And emulsifiers are what makes the food nice and smooth. It combines the water, the aqueous and the fat phase together. And what research has shown more recently is that these emulsifiers can actually affect your microbiome. And you've probably heard a lot about the microbiome, and I think this is all on the next slide. The microbiome is effectively, I guess you could say, another organ in your body, and it contributes to your health or to your ill health. And we certainly know emulsifiers do it, and other things like guar gum as well. And what this leads to is increased inflammation. In addition, a lot of evidence has come out to show that these groups of food impact quite severely on physical and mental health. And I guess the classic way of, we've got the processed foods, which are things like mayonnaise and herbs and spices, which may be prepped for sale in the supermarkets in jars. But we have these ultra-processed foods. And these are foods that a normal person couldn't normally make in their own kitchen with the normal processing equipment that they have in their kitchen. And one of the examples would be chips. So, for example, a potato is clearly not a processed or an ultra-processed food. It's a whole food. And you can prep it, you can make it a baked potato, you can have roast potatoes, and that's great. Now, you can also convert potato to cold potato crisps that you get in a packet. And you probably could make these in your own kitchen, for example. You could slice the potato really thinly and deep fry it 3 or 4 times to get that ultra crispness to it. So we could do that in virtually everyone's kitchen. But then we move to Pringles. And I hope everyone knows what Pringles are. Pringles are those chips that are sold in the tube, and they've got that curve, and every chip has got the same curve in it. And the way Pringles are made is by getting the potato, turning it into a powder, then squishing that powder together to form that disc shape, and then deep frying it. And I bet none of us could do that in our kitchen with whatever equipment we have. And so that's the definition of an ultra-processed food. And this is the group that we're really concerned about in terms of health. So after having shown you this picture with all this potentially appealing stuff, because it is manufactured to really appeal to us, it's what we really need to cut out of the diet because of its impact on inflammation and also on other physical and mental health outcomes as well. So this is just a bit of a graph for those that are more interested in it about the possible mechanisms that could be affecting it. So we've talked about the nutritional aspects, the fats, trans, saturated fats, salts and sugar, the non-nutritional additives in it, and also the gut microbiota. So I'll just use my mouse here. So increased sugar, increased fat, decreased fiber, decreased micronutrients. They're the nutritional aspects that can affect it. Sweeteners and emulsifiers affect inflammation. At one stage, we always thought that the artificial sweeteners were really good because it provided us with foods that we like without the added sugar. But what research has shown over the years is that we don't seem to see weight loss when people use artificial sweeteners. And the WHO released a report last year saying that any type of non-nutritive sweetener doesn't seem to be useful for trying to reduce weight. So you're best to try to avoid them and actually avoid sugar-based drinks as well. We've talked about the emulsifiers. The other parts of it is the bisphenol phthalates, the acrylamide that is in the processing techniques, and these may affect the gut permeability that you have. So between your so if you rip out your guts, this is a bit of an explanation. If you rip out your guts, well, not rip them out, sorry. So your intestinal tract is effectively at the outside part of your body as well. But there's only one layer of cells in your intestines, unlike your skin, which has got several layers of cells. So gut permeability is increased with the intake of ultra-processed foods. And there's also a decrease in short-chain fatty acids. And short-chain fatty acids are really important because they are the food that the microbiome eats. And what they do is they convert this to gas, which is, yes, the gas we can smell when we pass wind. But this gas is actually really important for your colonic health in that it irrigates all the cells and it kills those cells that are cancerous-like. So they're really important. Okay, so my hot tips for what you should do moving forward. Definitely fruit, vegetables and legumes should feature as a big part of your diet, and all the different colours. Eat a rainbow every day. Every different nutrient, every different smell, every different texture is because of a different nutrient. And these are nutrients that we know and nutrients that we don't know. So it's important to have them all. Okay, next one, fermented foods. Try to get some fermented foods in your diet. Things like kombucha, kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, cheese are all going to be really good. They improve your microbiome. They also help to synthesize the neurotransmitters that make us feel good. With this, probiotics are not needed. You actually get a better range of bacteria by eating fermented foods compared to having, little shots of probiotics. And dietary fiber is critical for the microbiome. So that's why the plant foods are really important. They provide the fiber that the bacteria eat. I've talked about variety within fruits and vegetables in colours. There's another group of research that has shown us that people have best health outcomes if they eat at least 30 different plant foods every week. And this includes different herbs and spices. So instead of going, well, I'm going to have carrots, peas and potatoes and tomato and blueberries, and they're my different coloured foods, that would only be 6 plant foods. So trying to get 30 different plant foods every week. It might be a good idea to jot down as the week goes how many you're having currently and trying to bump it up a bit. Don't forget the herbs and spices. Variety is like an insurance policy, if you like. It means you get all the nutrients in your diet, you get all the antioxidants, you get all the different types of fiber, which improves your microbiome as well. And then you'll also get a bit of microbiome in there with some of the fermented vegetable foods and fruit foods as well. My next top tip is to make sure you're including fish or omega-3 fatty acids in your diet. We've got EPA and DHA, which are found in fish and fish oil. You can have, if you're vegetarian or vegan, the preformed fatty acid before it gets converted to EPA, and DHA is in ALA, and that's found in flaxseed oil and green leafy vegetables and walnuts. But if you do this, it's a much slower process to converting it to EPA and DHA. It's not as effective as using EPA and DHA. And the evidence also tells us that men can't convert it quite as well as women can. These fatty acids are really important. It changes the fluidity of our brain cells and allows increased neural connections, so improving cognition, as well as, we know, improving inflammation for arthritis. So this is a really big one. Special treats. We all need them, don't we? After listening to this talk, it's going to sound like, you know, you can't have any of those ultra-processed foods, but there are ways around them. Make them enjoyable and healthy. Remember, if you make it in your own kitchen, it's going to be better than buying a processed cake or biscuits. Think dark chocolate, nuts, fruit, yogurts. I've got to say, chocolate dipped strawberries are almost one of my favourite food. Homemade is going to be much better, but trying to reduce it and not having it every day and actually having it as a treat 2 or 3 times a week. So in summary, what should you be doing? Just recapping everything. Reduce and avoid consumption of ultra-processed foods, drinks, snacks, and processed meats. Increase your fruit and vegetable intake. Eat fruit as a snack. If you're not going to be buying those other processed and ultra-processed foods, probably got a little bit more money budget to buy some of those fruits that you really enjoy. Mangoes, peaches, apricots, you know, strawberries, cherries, really yummy. Eat a rainbow of fruit and vegetables, the fermented foods, and trying to reduce your meat intake to having a meat-free day or 2 perhaps a week, replacing it with vegetables, lentils and beans, or rice and pasta in meals, and then replacing the red meat with chicken and fish, and using olive oil and preferably extra virgin olive oil. Now, we've probably all heard about this, but what I want to do is demonstrate how easy it is to make some of these changes. Now, this is Kevin, and this is what he eats every day. So it's not a bad diet. Muesli with milk. For morning tea, he has a biscuit or cake with coffee. For lunch, he has a cheese, ham, and lettuce sandwich. And he really packs the lettuce in there on white bread and some juice. For afternoon tea, he has a small chocolate with tea. For dinner, his evening meal, pasta with cream sauce, with ham and a side salad, so that's pretty good. And supper and dessert is ice cream or snacking on nuts or chocolate. And this is his usual diet. So we're going to modify this. And if we were all together in the same room, I would have asked for suggestions, but I'm going to do them all here about slight changes in how this can make it a healthier diet. So for breakfast, muesli with milk. I'm going to add some fruit to his muesli and swap the milk for yogurt. So really easy change there, and still keeping the same dairy groups. For morning tea, swapping the biscuits for fruits or nuts. That's an easy change. Lunchtime. So he's got that sandwich. I'm going to get rid of the juice because we know the juice is an ultra-processed food. We're going to use whole grain or multi-grain bread or even sourdough. I'm going to swap out the ham for either chicken or tuna and add more vegetables. Or if you get sick of having the sandwich every day, making a mixed bean salad with vegetables and using extra virgin olive oil on that and with whatever herbs appeals to him. Afternoon tea, swapping out the chocolate for fruit again, and that way he gets the 2 pieces of fruit a day. Dinner. So we can still have a pasta, but I'm going to have a tomato-based sauce with veggies. And having that onions in there and garlic and herbs. So we've got that tomato-based sauce cooking with the veggies. And then have salad or vegetables on the side as well, of course, with extra virgin olive oil. And, you know, you could add some sort of white meat to this a few times per week. Now, of course, that's just one meal, but there could, you know, there's other adaptations to other meals as well. And then supper and dessert, rather than having ice cream and chocolate, swapping it to dark chocolate, having nuts. Ice cream, lovely, isn't it? But it does contain a lot of that guar gum and potentially emulsifiers in it. So if you make your ice cream at home, it's going to be a better option to have it as a sometimes thing. So that's a modified diet plan. And everyone's probably going, oh yeah, those changes are simple. But we know it's actually difficult to implement these changes. And what we have to do when we're looking at making dietary changes is use SMART goals. And that is making them specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timed. And I'll show you what I mean for this. So, specific. Arthritis, one of the big things we can do is to start eating more fish. So The specific goal here is I will start eating fish. I don't eat any at the moment. And after this talk, I'm thinking, yeah, really good that I start eating fish. So I'm going to have a measure to this so I know I can achieve it. I will have fish once per week, even though the evidence tells us it's probably good to have it 2 or 3 times a week. If you make it a big change, it's going to be harder to do. So we'll just stick initially to 1 serve of fish per week to make it achievable. It's relevant because we know fish is anti-inflammatory, so it will help us with our arthritis. And I'm going to put a time to it. That I'm going to give myself a month to achieve this. And you might go, well, why can't you do it straight away? And people might say, well, look, you know, they've got a bit of meat to finish off in the freezer. They've got events planned or their meal plan planned for the next week or 2. It could be they don't actually know how to cook fish. So they might have to watch some YouTube videos to see how to cook fish and get some recipes that they will like. So this is what we call a SMART goal. And you can convert it to any of the groups you like. So, for example, another one could be, I will start having 1 piece of fruit every day. Because at the moment, I only have a fruit once a week, which is clearly not enough. So, specific, I'm going to start having fruit. I'm going to have 1 per day. We know that 2 is better, but that might be unachievable if we make it too big something that's going to be difficult to achieve. Fruit, we know, is good and is relevant because it contains antioxidants. We know the antioxidants help in reducing disease, so it's relevant. And I'm going to put a timeline to this that I want to start eating fruit every day, maybe by the end of February again. And you might start off doing it 2 or 3 times a week. You might need to start thinking about what fruit you're going to buy, how you're going to buy it, because at the moment you have your groceries delivered to you. So it's a bit, and you don't want that delivered. You don't want the fruit delivered. So you've got to find a good greengrocer. So you can do this with any of them. Don't make your goals unrealistic because you will never achieve them. Pick something that you know, yeah, I reckon I can do that. For some people, it might be, yeah, I reckon I can start eating fish every day because I eat it 2 to 3 times a week now and I've got a fishmonger down the road and it's easier. So make them specific to you and make them achievable. Myths. I don't know if we've got time to go to the myths. These are some of the myths around arthritis and foods that cause arthritis. Nightshade foods, no. We know tomatoes are really anti-inflammatory. We know they're a key part of the Mediterranean diet, so they are important. People talk about acid-producing foods. Just quickly want to remind everyone that your body regulates your acid levels no matter what you eat. People also blame dairy foods. That's a problematic group to take out of your diet because of the important nutrients it provides. Some people may say, look, they've got a food intolerance and every time they consume kiwi or guava, that they just feel they get worse. And what I'd suggest, if it's just one food, it's not a problem. But if it's a whole food group, that's when it becomes a problem and you've got a severe risk of getting a nutrient deficiency. Okay, so I'm going to just leave this up whilst we answer questions. So we can just get a reminder of the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating.
We've had someone ask if you can comment on the benefit of cherries or pure cherry juice in reducing arthritis and arthritis symptoms.
Yeah, look, I love cherries. That would be my favourite summer fruit. It was just a shame they were so expensive. So cherries, and it's in particular the sour cherries, have been shown to have anti-inflammatory properties. So yes, they do. But at the same time, most fruit and vegetables have something about them that helps reduce the risk of disease. So yes, eat cherries, have cherry juice, although it's very expensive, but don't have it so that you're excluding other fruit and vegetables. Remember that variety that is needed in the diet.
We've got someone asking that if there's any research about low starch diets helping with arthritis symptoms. Is there anything out there around that?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. There's a lot of research on at the moment about low carbohydrate diets, and I think that's maybe what they're referring to rather than low starch diets. What we know is that when they talk about low carbohydrate diets, they're not actually as low as people expect them to be. So often what they're doing is they're cutting out all the processed and ultra processed foods that contain free sugars in them. Now, I don't think it's certainly not enough evidence-based to say that it's going to help inflammation. And what you've got to remember is if you're not eating grains, the nutrients you're missing out on. So one of the key nutrients that is supplied by the grains food group is the B group vitamins. And there's about 6 or 7 different B group vitamins. And every single B group vitamin is important for making you feel more energetic. Okay, so I'm not recommending Berocca at all, right? But everyone's heard of the Berocca, get the bounce back in your body. That is what B vitamins do. They help the body release the energy that you need for your daily activities and for living. So it's a really key food group in the diet, which you don't want to avoid. Now, I'm just talking about B group vitamins. There's also a whole lot of other antioxidants in there, selenium, all of that. The best advice is, in terms of grains and cereals, is to have them as whole grain as possible and include variety. So have rye, have barley, have oats, have them all. That's the important thing. Someone might find that, they feel there's a reaction to one of them. And what I would say is just make sure you're correct. And if the symptoms are severe, I wouldn't just drop that food group. I'd go and see a medical practitioner, because I've heard of too often where people deplete a food group because of symptoms they get, and then later we find out that it's something more sinister like cancer. So never rely on your self-judgment. Always go to see the doctor.
We've got someone kind of following on. They asked it during the presentation. You touched on it a little bit with the diet plan with Kevin. They're asking, how do you transfer kind of tonight's information and maybe some of the information in your previous webinar into planned diets and recipes, and particularly if they've got a family with kids and other family members. So
Yeah.
how I kind of view that one is there any medical practitioners they can see, or are there any helpful websites or somewhere that you can point someone to?
Yeah, look, it's always tricky, isn't it, when one person in the family has to follow a diet for their health, and then trying to get everyone to eat the same and not have many, many dishes being cooked. So, I guess that's where the gradual change needs to be made. And what I would recommend is just trying to adapt the recipes that are currently eaten by the family, changing them. So if you normally do stir fries and they're really heavily meat-based, just gradually cutting down the red meat over time and adding more veggies to it, or swapping it to a white meat. Just making gradual changes that people don't notice. If you always used to have a fancy dessert, I guess dessert is one thing you can give to the rest of the family and you don't eat. But in reality, we probably want our family to eat healthy as well, right? So everyone should be doing that. Maybe going, okay, instead of having ice cream 3 times a week, I'm going to drop it to twice a week, and I'm going to get more fruit on the table. Or, swapping the milk chocolate for dark chocolate. Those sorts of things. Swapping those, worse foods out and putting in better foods gradually over time. And then perhaps talking to the family about how important it is. Whilst we're focusing on arthritis, remember these diets are for general health, and we know they provide better outcomes. There was actually a bit of research that came out today that they're seeing an increased rate of bowel cancer in younger people. And they think that is due to the higher levels of obesity we're seeing in younger people, and also the lower levels of fibre. So remember, these diets are generally for good health.
Perfect. Very, very well go through. And I'd say the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating at that eatforhealth.gov.au, they've got some good diet plans and recipe plans and things like that.
And there's also, absolutely, Ben. There's also Mediterranean diet plans. Yeah, there's lots out there. There's lots and lots, yeah. Just avoid ones that suggest you buy one of their products or you need something special, or you should be avoiding a certain food group. Generally, government-based ones are providing the most unbiased, non-marketing evidence.
We've got someone asking if canned fermented sauerkraut is as beneficial as freshly fermented sauerkraut.
Normally, if I'm remembering my supermarket, is it in cans or is it in jars? It's always in the fridge section, because it's got live bacteria in it, it's got to be in the fridge section.
So the ones that there is, I can say that because I walked past some earlier today. So you're saying the ones which are in the fridge section, they're probably the still alive ones, but the ones which are canned and things like that might have been heat treated, so they're not as good.
That's right. Yeah. And also yogurt. Don't forget yogurt, right? Yogurt's and is a great one to have as well. But yes. And I sometimes see people saying buy yogurt with a live culture, or yogurt has got a live culture in it. So, but stick to the ones that are unsweetened, and put your own fruit on top at home, or nuts.
Following on with the fermented goods, someone's asking they're very popular now with the low sugar kombuchas in a can. They're asking, this might be hard to answer for all brands. Are they a soda, or are they really in the fermentation category, or is it a case-by-case basis?
Yeah, look, as they've said, if it's a low sugar one, it is a fermented product. And once again, it should be in the fridge, buying the ones that are cold. Because once again, it's a live culture. And if you didn't have it in the fridge, it could eventually explode. So those that are not in the fridge have been heat treated once again. And try to pick the ones with as low level of sugar in them as possible.
Someone's asking if there's any evidence of celery juice in arthritis. Is there anything around that in the literature, if you know?
Yeah. So look, celery's been really popular in terms of it's a negative weight food, which it isn't. If you ate enough celery, you would gain weight, but it's difficult to eat that much celery, as it is difficult to eat that much lettuce to gain weight. No, there's no specific evidence around celery juice. It just falls into the category of all vegetables and consuming all vegetables. We tend to not like juices as much because they're not as satiating as eating the vegetable. So it's a lot easier to drink a glass of orange juice than it is to have 3 oranges. So we always promote fresh whole fruit and vegetables over juiced.
Perfect. Someone's asking a similar one about thoughts on coffee and inflammation and arthritis. Is there any research about that?
Yeah, there's no specific research looking at coffee. Coffee does have anti-inflammatory properties like tea does, but there's nothing that I can recall seeing specifically about it. So it's not a problem to drink it at all. We do have limits on coffee intake of about 450 milligrams a day, which is 3 to 4 espressos, depending on how you make them. So trying to stay under that limit. So absolutely keep enjoying your coffee.
Someone's asking about tin tuners, and they're asking the differences between, because there's lots out there, it's pretty much a supermarket aisle itself these days.
Absolutely.
If they're all okay, and including the flavoured and mixed types, is there any ones that are better? Is there anything you should look out for?
So tuna is a deep sea fish, which normally has a lot of omega-3 fats in it. But when they can it, they boil out some of the fat. So canned tuna is not as high as omega-3 fats as fresh tuna is. It's still good though. It's still something you can eat, and I eat. Some of the flavours, if they add soy oil in them, it's a little bit complicated. The last talk I did, I talked about the 2 different types of polyunsaturated fats, omega-6 and omega-3, and they both compete with each other. So you preferably want tuna that's been canned in either a spring water or olive oil, rather than one that's done in soy oil or sunflower oil. So trying to get one like that would be best. But then things that like savoury tomato and onion, I'm just recalling the different flavours, would be fine. I know there's lemon and dill in water. There's smoked flavour. All those sorts are fine. And even if you do have it with, an oil in it, it's still going to be better than not having it. But as much as possible, trying not to have those vegetable oils in there.
So someone's asking about the red meat versus white meats. So are they correct in thinking that red meats encourage inflammation and that white meats don't encourage it as much or don't have the same effect?
That's what the evidence appears to tell us. Certainly the processed red meats are worse, and then red meats, and then white meats. So generally when we look at recommendations that are made about how often to eat them, and there's a few, there's, you know, the AGHE, there's the Mediterranean diet, there's also the Lancet Planetary Diet, which is a diet for the best health for the planet as well as people. They all recommend about 1 to 2 serves of red meat a week. And once again, if it's red meat cooked in a tomato sauce with lots of veggies in it, like a stew or a casserole, that's going to be better than a burnt piece of red meat on a barbecue that some of us may have had on Australia Day. So, yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, Evangeline.
My pleasure.